All right, folks, it's a little bit cloudy on the outside and all of that. Definitely a little bit cloudy out there, and we'll see how the weather holds up. I think I heard that there might be some more rain coming on the way. I don't think it was today. I think it might be tomorrow or Wednesday. But we're going to see how this all plays out and also see if some guests that I invited decide to pop on in and talk about nonprofits and all of that. And of course, there are a number of things going on in our world. So we'll share a little bit about that as well. So definitely looking forward to some great conversations and hearing what people have to say about a number of things. In the meantime, I'm going to go get me some water real quickly and I'll let you check out a little bit about some of the shows that exist here. All right. As I was saying, it is Memorial Day. Hope everybody out there is having a good Memorial Day, maybe even enjoying some picnics and enjoying some of the things that go on with Memorial Day. Definitely, folks usually get out, go to a picnic. And of course, a lot of times folks will also go and honor some of the fallen people in their lives as well. So, definitely, that is some of the things that go on. I know that earlier today I saw that there had been the president over at Arlington Cemetery, and of course he was honoring the fallen soldiers and all of that. So definitely that's some of the things that go on a regular basis during Memorial Day. And of course people have also been doing individual celebrations as well. And of course we know Memorial Day is also seen as the first unofficial day of summer. So some folks have headed over there to the beach and have definitely enjoying beach company as well. So definitely that's some of the things that are going on this Memorial Day. And of course, we're interested to hear what you've got going on your Memorial Day. So definitely get in touch with us. Let us know if you've got anything special going on in your Memorial Day as well. Because definitely, I know a lot of people do amazing things during this holiday and definitely have a good time honoring the fallen soldiers and all of that. So definitely keeping that in mind as we think about a lot of folks that have honored their country by giving the ultimate sacrifice, their lives in that call of duty to the military or whatever else is going on. By the way, if you're calling an Uber, you can expect to pay more. So I know that's separate from Memorial Day, but that is one of the news stories that I saw today. That's right. The cheap and quick rides people have become accustomed to with Uber and Lyft are now more costly and not as readily available, according to the New York Times. With insufficient driver availability to meet rebounding demand, the companies are passing the cost of finding workers on to customers. In April, the cost of a ride was 40% higher than it was a year ago, according to research firm Rakuten Intelligence. When short on drivers, Uber and Lyft resort to surge pricing, which has recently made prices jump 50% or more for customers. Uber CEO said he's not happy that the riders are experiencing longer wait times and higher prices. Amid driver shortages, Uber is aiming for next hour commerce with Uber Eats delivering everything on to customers on demand. So definitely, folks may be going back to looking at taxis and other things, but I do have friends in that space of riding for and working for Uber and all of that. So definitely, this will not impact them too greatly, as we know that more and more people actually were getting out doing traveling this weekend as well. So we understand that more and more people are actually getting into the airlines and going on trips during this Memorial Day. And by the way, on another sad note of a consequence of the pandemic and all of that, there's another story that said millions risk eviction come this June. That's right, with more than 11 million Americans behind on their rent, many could be forced from their homes when the national eviction ban expires on June 30th. CNBC reports the Center for Disease Control and Prevention's eviction moratorium, which was enforced in September, has reduced the normal number of eviction filings over the same time period by at least half, according to sociologist Peter Hepburn. Experts warn the number of evictions could skyrocket once the ban lifts, which housing advocates say is coming at a particularly difficult time with states still struggling to distribute Congress's $45 billion in rental assistance. So as the states are trying to deal with how to distribute the money, definitely a lot of folks are also dealing with the fact that they may be facing eviction and trying to find other means of living as well. You know, there's that old saying, we're only about two paychecks away from facing homelessness and all of that. And definitely COVID-19 has brought this even more into the forefront and all of that. So definitely, I hope that they come up with a solution and that too many people do not suffer this kind of hardship, because it can be very much of a hardship and all of that. So definitely, let's hope that things are going to be better in that regards, and that things will get better as we move on into the recovery phase of what's going on with the pandemic. And speaking of the recovery phase, the United States Postal Service is restructuring and raising prices as part of Postmaster General Louis DeJoy's plan to cover a projected 160 billion in losses over the next 10 years. The Washington Post reports part of the overhaul includes laying off hundreds of management level employees, though an agency spokesperson wouldn't say exactly how many jobs are affected. Overall prices for products and services are expected to jump by almost 7% this summer, including the cost of a first class stamp, which will increase from 55 cents to 58 cents. And I remember when the stamp might have been even only a dime or something like that. So definitely the stamps are continuing to go up in price. Who knows? Maybe in the next decade or two, we may see a dollar stamp, but let's hope not. Let's hope that maybe the reverse will happen and that things will go into the opposite and reverse order and all of that. So we're going to be interested to see how this goes and all of that in that regards. By the way, if you've got a teenager in your life and they're looking for a summer job, it looks like summer jobs are actually out there for our teenagers in our lives and all of that. So as the economy continues to reopen, employers are scrambling to hire service workers to meet a surge in demand, and those taking advantage of open roles are teenagers, writes the New York Times. The share of 16 to 19-year-olds in the workforce has not been this high since 2008, with nearly 256,000 teens in that age group gaining employment in April. After taking a hit at the beginning of the pandemic, the rise in teen employment is bringing on higher wages. In an amusement park in Pittsburgh, the starting wage is $13, up from $9 last year. So definitely it's good to see that the teenagers are also getting better pay as well. So definitely that's always a great thing, and maybe they can help their parents and guardians as they get that better pay. I'm hoping that that's what parents and guardians are asking for, is a little bit of support as they deal with the pandemic along with their kids and all of that. So that's another one of the stories and all of that. And I alluded earlier to the fact that more and more people are out there without masks, and it looks like this is the first maskless holiday in a year. That's right. It's very clear that the pandemic isn't over, but many Americans are enjoying their first holiday in more than a year without a mask on. This Memorial Day weekend is unfolding just over 2 weeks after the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention revised its guidance to say that fully vaccinated people don't need to wear a mask indoors and don't need to practice physical distancing. Those who are vaccinated but compromised are encouraged to talk to their doctors before ditching their mask. About 2 million people a day are expected to pass through U.S. airports over the Memorial Day surge, putting the travel hubs and airlines to the test. After more than a year apart, Many families are finally coming together again. The Wall Street Journal captured touching homecomings in what it calls the Great American Reunion. More than 2.5 million teens and tweens in the U.S. have gotten their first shots, per the CDC, giving the COVID-19 vaccination campaign a major boost. An increase in Latinos getting inoculated and people on the fence firming up appointment plans could signal the 70% vaccination threshold to achieve herd immunity is in reach, according to a Kaiser Family Foundation survey. So we're definitely seeing that more and more people are doing that, and that is a great thing. So it looks like we're definitely turning the corner, and hopefully there'll be a permanent turn of the corner, and there won't be any kind of uh, going backwards and all of that. So hopefully we won't have folks going backwards, and it will be a permanent turn of the corner in that sense. So definitely that's one of the things that is some great news in that regards. We're also seeing that decisions are now being made that will define or redefine working people's lives the world over. Whether to return back to the commute, the office, and pre-pandemic work life, many workers, especially those on laptops, have the freedom to choose less scheduled, more family flexible lifestyles in locations they've always wanted to live. Some CEOs and managers are skeptical, others won't give the choice. But a recent article on LinkedIn by Industrious CEO Jamie Hadori argues that coercing employees back won't work in the longer run, and higher productivity is likely found through more freedom to choose. And I'm definitely one of those that believes in the freedom to choose and all of that. So hopefully we'll see more people giving folks the freedom to choose in that regards as well. So that's just some of the things that are going on in the world. But by the way, President Biden has denounced the current surge in anti Semitic threats and violence that has swept the nation in recent weeks as despicable, adding that they must stop. Anti Semitism has risen sharply in various parts of the world, but the uptick in harassment, vandalism, and violence targeting Jewish people in the past 2 weeks across North America is stoking fears among residents. The Anti Defamation League logged 222 reports of anti Semitism in the past 2 weeks. Last year, it recorded more than 1,200 incidents, a 10% jump from 2019. I'm always one to encourage people to get along and to actually do a better job of getting along across ethnic differences, religious differences, and various other differences as well. As I've said on this show and other shows, one of my favorite shows is none other than the show that is, I mean, not the show, but the song Imagine. That's right. I said show, but I meant song Imagine, even though a show that I would highlight as giving that same kind of message is the TV show Among Us. So definitely a big fan of that. But what I was thinking about at that particular time was the song Imagine. But both of those are about us trying to give positivity and positive messages in all that we do. So definitely it's something that I try to do in my life on a regular basis. And I hope other folks do that as well. So that's some of the news articles that are going on. And of course, there are others as well. As a matter of fact, another article is saying a commute a day keeps the doctor away. Mention commuters on LinkedIn and other platforms, and you'll likely get a whole host of responses in favor and those not in favor. Mary likes listening to her podcast on the bus for 45 minutes, and I know others that like to sit back there and read books and do other things while they're going on their trips. And of course, the others like to spend time with their kids. And I definitely know some folks that are in that realm as well. And as some workers get called back to the offices, commuting will once again be part of our daily routine. Harvard Business Review says this isn't necessarily a bad thing. In fact, commuting within reason is good for our psyche. And you might ask why. Commutes give us structure, which is written deep into the human genome. It also helps us ease in and out of our work home life transition, which can help stem burnout. That's right. A lot of times you use that time of getting back and forth to get prepared to get into the work environment. I know that when I was commuting between the apartment and a job location for measurement, oftentimes I would sit back, reflect, make phone calls, do other things, maybe even play some of the games on the computer and all of that, those phone games like the trivia games and some of the other ones like Word with Friends. And by the time I was at work, I was ready to have a more work focused mentality. So definitely, I would agree with what this article is saying as well. And by the way, just want to give one last story from the world of LinkedIn news, and I may come up with some more news later on, but I think I'm going to give you a chance to see if one of our guests that I invited has made the trip in to the room. And if they haven't, I've already lined up a past show that you may be interested in as well. And I may give you a little bit of that while we're waiting to see if the guests will show up or not. But the summer box office has come screaming back with the debuts of A Quiet Place Part 2 and Disney's live action Cruella. Deadline reports the Quiet sequel is on track for a 58.5 million opening over the 4-day holiday. While Cruella is expected to nab 26.5 million, analysts say the Emma Stone-led Cruella could have earned more had it been released exclusively in theaters rather than simultaneously on the big screen and as a Disney Plus premium offering. But Disney expects the film will enjoy a long, profitable life on the streamer. So definitely looks like they're definitely counting for the streaming to help as well and all of that. And definitely, hopefully, we'll be seeing some more great animations in that regard as well. Like I said, I'm going to bring up a clip of the interview that I did with the gentleman that was involved with the COVID campaign and trying to do some great work in that campaign here in this area. So we're going to bring up that interview, share a little bit of that with you, and I might be back with some more details of some other things also. But definitely want to give you at least a taste of what was going on in that regards. And like I said, if the guests show up, I may come back and of course, we'll get into the interview with them as well. But we like to keep things rolling, even on the holiday weekends. We don't like to leave IBM TV out there stranded and all of that. So we like to keep folks informed about things going on in our community and beyond. So definitely glad to share this platform with you. Glad to have a lot of interesting things going on in our world, and definitely looking forward to some more great conversations and all of that. But in the meantime, while we're waiting to see if my nonprofit guests will show up or not, we're going to give you a little bit of the interview that we did a couple of weeks ago dealing with the whole COVID campaign and some of the things that are surrounding that. And like I said, if the guest shows up, I'll be back. And even if the guest doesn't show up, I'll probably be back before the interview ends so that we can have more conversations about some of the things going on in our world. Hey, folks, it's another edition of the radio show with Mark Lee. And of course, we've got a exciting guest that's going to talk about a very important issue that's going on in the world. I'm here to bring him on very shortly and all of that. But first, I wanted to check with folks. By the way, it's another good day. I was just actually outside a little bit on the maybe overcast side and all of that. But other than that, the temperatures were good. It's May. And definitely, folks are out there not wearing as many masks. And that's what part of what we'll talk about. But also the gas seems like the gas is starting to flow again. So some of the gas stations are starting to get that gas. So hopefully that crisis is over. And definitely there's been a lot of other things going on in the news. Y'all know I'm a sports fan. So I was glad to see that the 76ers, coached by my schoolmate Doc Rivers, is the number one seed. And we'll see how that plays out, because, there's some teams that are low seeds that are actually very well known, because the 7-8 game in the West is going to be the Lakers against the Golden State Warriors. So the number one player in the league, Steph Curry, against some other amazing players like LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and others. But they're seated all the way in the play-in. So this ought to be a very interesting playoff, and that's just in the West. The East ought to be interesting as well. And then, of course, folks are paying attention to a lot of things happening in the news and all of that. And I may come back and talk about some of those in a later part of this show and all. But I do want to get to Delon Canterbury, and he's got some interesting things to talk about, because we've got some folks that are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. So I need to find out what's going on with that. But they've also had some amazing events going on, including one that was this past weekend. So I'm interested in hearing about that as well. And I had the pleasure of meeting Delon through some contacts that I have through the African American Dance Ensemble and all of that. So definitely looking forward to a great conversation and finding out if we're anywhere near 60%. So like I said, I know that last time I checked, I think 50% or a little bit above of the population was vaccinated, but we still have some in the African American community that are not necessarily getting the vaccinations as fast as we would like. So let me bring Delon in, and we'll have a great conversation with him, seeing about what's going on and what we can do to make things better. How you doing, Delon?
Hey, Mark, what's going on, man? Thank you for
Not
having
much.
me.
I'm just sitting over here. I was getting ready to tell folks that I'm actually trying to do some new experimentations, because I just recently joined because of a good friend of mine, and the fact that they've gone Android. So I've actually joined the Clubhouse. So I've actually was on that earlier, trying to see how that's going and everything, since everybody's jumping on the Clubhouse route. So I'm actually going to see if they can pick up the podcast and everything as well. So, new experimentations going on. And I was like, hey, I can now join the Clubhouse family, because it seems like everybody, including celebrities, is on that and everything. So it's been an interesting ride so far.
Well, good for you, man. It's definitely interesting. A lot to learn, a lot of good information, and it's a great resource.
Yeah, definitely a great resource. Speaking of great resources, I know you did this amazing event yesterday. Can you share a little bit with our listeners about that event? And also, like I was mentioning, I know a lot of folks are still hesitant about getting the vaccination. I think our population is doing all right, but maybe not as well as we should be doing. So I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on that, as to how we're doing and whether we can be doing better. Because the last I heard, it was 51%. And I know the governor recently said the mask can come off, but even that, some people are hesitant about, because they're like, I don't know whether you've been vaccinated or not, because there's no real proof of vaccination unless you got one of those cards and all of that.
You're absolutely right, man. But yeah, thank you again, Mark, for having me, man. Yesterday's event was fantastic. The African American COVID Task Force, along with several strategic partners, including War for Life, Durham Tribe, Durham County Public Health. We've had the School of Nursing volunteer as well, and several others, Community Health Coalition. We all came together and were managed to help out with the Trosa Thrift Store on Roxborough Street. We had a huge event. There was live music, there was food, there was dancing, there was the news. I mean, we were able to vaccinate nearly 182 people within 4 hours. It was phenomenal. And honestly, to be honest, Mark, what drove a lot of the traffic was the fact that kids were getting vaccinated. So parents were out there getting their kids out there left and right. Anyone 12 and up is eligible. And I must say, it was such a huge event. It did not rain. We had good food, and we had some good time. So it was really, really a blessing seeing that in action.
It was good to see that. I know y'all are very happy about that. Are there any other plans for any other big ones, events like that in the near future? Or was this a one-time event, or do y'all looking at doing maybe this weekend or several times over the rest of May, June, and the rest of the summer?
No, thank you for asking. So we have actually solidified a partnership with Trosa. So we'll be doing this going forward. There will be another one on June 6th. Same people, same time, same date. It'll be 12 to 4, June 6th at the Trosa Thrift Store off of Roxborough, where we'll have food and tons of vaccinations of your choice. We had all 3, Pfizer,
Okay.
Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson. So if you don't want that one, there's no excuse. You got another. But not to mention, there's another one going on this weekend. There are
Okay.
actually two events going on. There is one at Giffin's and another that we're also coordinating with as well at Hillside with the same people, Durham Public Health Department, as well as War for Life. So we are helping again with Chapel Hill's Pediatrics, and we're all going to be doing the same thing. We're looking for volunteers, and we're looking for people to put some vaccines in those arms as well, especially children 12 and up.
Okay. Are people still having hesitation about the vaccine, or are you seeing less hesitations, or are people actually understanding that we need to get this herd immunity? How is our community doing in terms of hesitations, and what are some of the things that you can let folks know to alleviate some of those hesitations if they're having those?
Well, being a part of the African American COVID Task Force and working as a pharmacist with Geriatric, which is a medication management company, we see all types of questions just like that. And so we not only help to address them in real time, but frankly, comparing what we were seeing last year from August to November to now, huge decline. And so it's reassuring that we're seeing more people looking to get it than really rely on bad information on whether that's be best for them or not. The problem, though, is, Mark, is that we're seeing more of our younger adults who are getting more of the disease now. And those are the ones who tend to have this air of invincibility. I'm good. I don't need to worry about it. And so those are the ones that we have to start working towards to reach, especially those parents who may still not be sure if they want to put a vaccine in their child. And so I do see a decrease specifically in our older populations. They're pretty much, yeah, let me get it. I need it now. Or they're the ones who are encouraging their loved ones to get it because they're not going to see you if you're not getting it. And so now it's a matter of changing our plan to get the messaging out on social media and get the younger adults involved who maybe is a little more hesitant or unsure if this is the right thing for them.
Yeah, because I know one of the things I've heard people talk about is they'll jump on a major case that'll happen, and we know that with anything, vaccinations included, that it's not going to be 100%. And they'll jump on something like the Yankees, the baseball team that had some people that got the COVID even after they had been vaccinated. There have been some other cases like that as well. So can you refer to that and speak to that? Because I do know that that's a concern that sometimes people have even after they've got vaccinated, because they feel that they hear of these famous cases and they're like, wait a minute, I got the vaccination. I'm supposed to be good now.
Right, right. And it's a fair question. The truth is, we all know that these vaccines are not 100%. And so people can still have the virus, even if you're completely feeling fine, asymptomatic is what they call them, and have no symptoms. And so the ease of spreading this virus is fairly easy when we're in the middle of a pandemic. And that is why we're trying to make sure people are getting it so the chances of you being harmed are lessened. People who get the vaccine, nearly 95% are not going to die, and nearly 95% to 100 are not put in the hospital. So even though they had it, just to add to that, Bill Maher came out and said he had it last week, and he was vaccinated as well. And so we've been saying since the beginning, it's not 100% effective, which is why we encourage you to still socially distance, wear your mask, and stay 6 feet away from people, and wash your hands.
Yeah.
That being said, that's not an excuse not to get it. I've had too many patients, young, healthy, no other health conditions. They got it, and now they're a long-term COVID hauler. And now they have to deal with taking lifelong medications and blood thinners, or they got to find out how to go through physical therapy to learn how to drink water again. And so even though that may be a case where it's a little more extreme, there's so much we don't know about this virus. And so why chance having some minor side effects, potentially, majority have minor side effects, to a lifelong world of hell with potential complications from COVID? You don't want that medical bill, one, and you don't want that life risk for you and your loved ones.
No, I definitely understand that. Were you somewhat surprised when the governor lifted some of these restrictions like the mask? And I know he's been talking about some places having full occupancy and things of that nature. But I just read where the UK was having similar things, and now they are having some of their scientists speculating that they might need to go back into tighter restrictions. So I was reading an article in The Guardian with that going on. So were you surprised that Ms. Cohen and the governor in the sense that they've relieved these restrictions this point of time, or were you somewhat expecting it?
I was somewhat expecting it from the perspective of, on a state level, we're tending to follow what the CDC and FDA says. Now, if you're going to ask me how I feel about the CDC making that decision, I'm a little bit at pause myself. I personally am completely in agreement with the outdoor recommendation, where I can see how physically that may be very, very low risk. However, you're basically asking the community to enforce and enroll the honor system. And that is the problematic part for me is, yes, we want to encourage people to get vaccinated with these rewards, like you can travel now, you can see your loved one without wearing a mask, and that's cool all indoors. However, not everyone's going to play that game. And so I'm a little bit more cynical in the sense that I think it's a little too soon to make that call. I would give it at least a couple more months where we at least hit our 75%, 60% herd immunity, or at least have our country vaccinated on that level as well, on a national level, as well as statewide. But also, we're not out the woods, guys. Even though America seems to be on a downtrend, we have an entire world of people still suffering. And as long as planes still exist and people can travel, you do not know where that person may come from in that indoor setting. And so if they were carrying a strain asymptomatically, who knows what could happen? And I honestly worked as on the COVID task force initially last year with the poison control center. So I was taking these calls with those first outbreaks. And you see people from Tyson plants, people from biotech conferences. You don't know where they're coming from. It could be anywhere. It could be even a church congregation. And this is not to instill fear, but I think it's a little premature to say, hey, no mask indoors. We don't even know 10 people in there are anti-vaxxers or may just not want to get it and they may be carrying. So it's not to foment fear, but really, I don't want us to go back to square one. And that's my biggest fear as a pharmacist and seeing the majority of Black, Latina, and Native Americans die the most from this.
No, no doubt about that. One of the things I was wondering about is do you have any fear of that second shoe dropping? You know, we also saw India kind of have a major push toward a lot of people healing, and they thought they were on the road to recovery, and now they're in the middle of another crisis. So I was wondering, is there some of that fear even here as we're getting the vaccinations that another variant or something could come along, or that we might not get enough of the vaccinations quick enough, and that there could be a second wave? Because I know even if you study history, the Spanish flu had a second wave in like its second year as well. So I was just wondering, is there any of those fears, even as you're doing this work, that could happen? I mean, I hope it doesn't happen, but I also am a student of history.
Oh, absolutely. And I appreciate you being one. Frankly, it is always in the back of our minds in the medical community that there could be another variant that adds to our already existing fears, right? In doing so, the good news is we are on a downtrend. More people are getting vaccinated, and our vaccines are doing pretty well so far. And in that case, the statistics are there in that, yeah, there may be a second wave, but it may not be like that second wave we had last year when this first thing broke out. And so there is hope, especially when more people are getting vaccinated. But in the back of my mind, I have to agree that there are variants everywhere. There's always going to be a variance. But unlike the flu virus, this is mutating relatively slower than other coronaviruses. So we have a little bit of time to predict what may be an issue. And that's where hopefully these booster vaccines currently being in development will still protect you. And that's why I'm more hopeful than fearful.
Yeah, and that actually raises a good question, the booster vaccines. Because I've heard some people speculating, will we have to be like the flu shot? Will we have to have a vaccine every year for the rest of our lives or until a certain time frame in our lives and all of that? And there is some speculation among some that that may be the new norm, just like we might have to have a norm with hybrid education. We might have to have a norm with hybrid events and things of that nature, that this kind of hybrid possibility may exist with in terms of having to go and get booster shots on a regular. I know that that's something that's been encouraged with flu shots for years, but I'm just wondering, do you think that that's something that folks need to be prepared for, that they might have to go and get another shot, say, maybe not even annually, but every 3 years, or every 5 years, or something like that in order to stay healthy? I don't know if Dion froze on me or what. Did you hear the question? Or
Absolutely.
me?
And it's a great question.
Yep, you were saying?
Hey, sorry about that.
That's all right.
It's a great question. It's a great question. We still don't know for sure how long our immunity will last. We anticipate that their boosters will be made, and we don't know yet if it'll be a yearly thing or every couple of years. My prediction is that we will likely have coronavirus around for a while. And so it may become something serial like the flu virus. I think it is a probability that it may happen. We still don't know all the facts yet. So we're still investigating that. And trust me, that's the $1 million question. We want to know how long it lasts. But looking at the way this virus is spreading, and basically, if we're going to have ebbs and flows, especially come winter, which a lot of our medical community is a little bit worried about, and another resurgence, I think we're going to be seeing coronavirus for a while. And that being the case, we're probably going to have boosters. We're probably going to have maybe yearly, maybe every 5 years. We don't know yet, but I think that this will be around for sure.
It sounds like it's going to be around for a while, and that's what I know a lot of people were speculating about. I've actually had some friends, and just a slight switch in the conversation, but still keeping it medical and everything, that have been in the pharmacy field and all of that. I remember Mr. McLaughlin, whose mom passed away not that long ago, having a pharmacy over there at North Carolina Central University. And I know that there's an African American pharmacy that's near where Bush fan used to have his store and everything. But just your own career, could you talk about how you got into pharmacy? Because I know my granddad was a biologist and was very much involved in that field. He was the actual person that the Central Biology Building is named after. But I was just wondering how you got into pharmacy and what led you into this career.
Oh, yeah, man. I appreciate you asking. So, just a bit about me. My parents, they are immigrants, and they came from South America, Guyana. So us having a Caribbean background, we were all about using natural products, natural plants, ways to get herbal remedies to heal and empower your body. And so that really got me interested in the world of how do these plants work? How does medicine work? How do we treat people with conditions? And that just really had me excited about how I can heal people. And so since I was more of a nerd and interested more in the drug part of patient care, I decided to be a pharmacist. As a pharmacist, I ended up founding a company focused on not only getting people off of too many medications, but reducing harmful drug interactions that happen way too often. Overprescribing is a real rampant problem. And so, apart from getting my specialty in geriatric or senior care pharmacy, I started a company called Geriatrics. And we focus on not only medication deprescribing, but we also focus on genetic testing so that minorities can get the best information on their healthcare and not just get the same medication that everyone else gets, assuming that will work. And so I believe pharmacists are more than just people who put labels on a bottle. We
Right.
help people with transportation, financial assistance, just like social workers do. We also make sure we work with your doctor to make sure you know that this medication might not be best for you. So we serve as patient advocates and educators. And that to me, Mark, has been my passion. And that's why I'm here today, to not only empower y'all, but show you that pharmacists are more than just people at a community setting.
Hey, that sounds great and everything. What kind of advice would you give to folks, young people, if they were thinking about getting into pharmacy? And I noticed the title is geriatrics, and a lot of times people, when they think of that term, they think of age and the fact that we are an aging population and all of that. I sometimes jokingly say, and I know that it's a human impossibility, but they always told me set your standards high because the worst you can do is fail. So even though
Yeah.
I know it's impossible to live to 200, I'm going for it. So, like I said, don't know that I'm doing anything to encourage that because I don't always eat the healthiest food. As a matter of fact, I earlier today ordered from DoorDash some fast food, so I know that probably ain't helping. But I'm still setting the standard high and all of that. So, what are some of the things that you're learning about aging, but the more important
Right,
question
right.
is that whole concept of the young people. What kind of advice would you give them about going into the field of pharmacy?
Hey, absolutely, man. So I encourage people that if you want to get into this space, make sure you are coming from a place of love. Like you need to be serving who is in front of you, not yourself, because this is a tough field. It's not easy. Healthcare just isn't an easy field. And that's really general advice for anyone. But pharmacy specifically, you really have so much you can do. And how to get into it starts with really asking, reaching out to those who are in positions that interest you, and just try to shadow someone. I especially recommend if you have a teacher, faculty, or just myself included, if you want to reach out, that I can be a resource to try to help you get on that path. That being said, pharmacy right now isn't in the prettiest of spaces. Pharmacists are grossly overworked, at least in the retail setting. And with COVID, their lifestyles can be a little bit stressful right now, giving shots while filling prescriptions. However, we're more than just community pharmacists. We can do so much. We can do research. We can do industry. We can work with big pharma. We could work with community groups and become educators and teachers. I mean, pharmacists are versatile. We can also write. We can also help people and patients on a care team in the hospital. And so, Mark, one thing I tell people is that you think of a radiologist, a cardiologist, or all these specialists for medical doctors, but there are usually pharmacists who exactly do the same thing as those medical doctors as well. And so for each and every type of doctor, there's pretty much that type of pharmacist as well. So don't necessarily think it's all just community. Let me go sell your pills at a store. Pharmacists are way more than that. We're educators, we're influencers, we're team partners, and we're one of the most accessible and trusted healthcare professionals in the world. And that being said, we help people save money and we know the drugs better than anyone else. So if you love medicine, you love knowing how to teach people and empower them how to change behaviors, then this is a field for you.
Definitely. And I know one of the other things people are always thinking about is the fact that it's such a powerful part of North Carolina's legacy. I mean, Durham is known as the city of medicine. Of course, there's the Research Triangle Park, which has all those great biomedical companies out there and everything. So I was wondering for our global audience, if you could talk a little bit about that part of the history as well, because I do know that not everybody knows about the Research Triangle Park and its medicine titles as well as Durham's medical titles. So it is an international platform. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about that part of our legacy as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, back in the early 90s, before GSK merged, I mean, and GlaxoSmithKline is a really well-known pharma company. I mean, it was just rampant with research and heavy tech sectors here, and the area is growing. In addition, Mark, Google and Apple both announced that they're going to be moving here to Research Triangle Park, and they're going to be having new plants around here. And so the history of science here really goes way back. Like nearly every institute of schooling here is NC Central, the Aggies, A&T, UNC, and Duke are powerhouses, as well as NC State. And so we are leading the field in not just healthcare, but biotech, R&D, research and development. And a lot of the big name pharmaceutical companies that make these drugs are in our own backyard. So that being said, when you have that type of access, they have internships, they have programs, they have ways to recruit, even for minority focused initiatives, to get more diversity in these areas. And now is just the best time more than ever to start reaching out and figuring out ways you can get involved. Most institutes and schools have some type of connection to somebody in the Research Triangle Park. And I've been blessed to say that my affiliations here have gotten me in touch with big name companies like ViiV, GlaxoSmithKline, Biogen, Merck, and a lot of my classmates just from pharmacy school work in these spaces. You know, it could be from regulatory affairs, it could be oncology, it could be just being a sales rep and helping people decide which meds are best for your doctor's office. And so it really is pretty widespread what you can get into here. And we're honestly blessed to have all these in our backyard. but we also do have some strong minority representation in these fields too that we're trying to grow.
Do you think that we've got enough minority representation, or is that something that we can
Well,
grow more along? Because I've actually had a couple of friends that were in that sales department, like with one used to work with Glaxo when it was Glaxo, and then they went off to one of their spinoff companies, and they're
right.
still traveling around. Well, not now because of COVID, but before COVID, they were traveling around the world making sales to the doctors and everything. And she was definitely a African American woman and everything. But I just don't know if there's enough of that going on. But you're in the field, so do you think that we have enough representation? Is that something we need to improve on?
Oh, we definitely need to improve on it. I don't think we have nearly enough that we should have to let people know what opportunities are there. And so, unfortunately, in light of the current or recent deaths, we have, of course, we're dealing with Andre Brown and, of course, George Floyd.
Right.
People are now talking more about diversity and equity initiatives. Whether it be fake or not, they're still trying to make sure that this is becoming at least known through their company. And so, do I think we have adequate representation? No, we are severely and grossly underrepresented nearly in every field, including pharmacy as well as other parts of medicine. In fact, most pharmacies males are 4% of the profession. And I believe Black in general people are 7% of all pharmacists. So again,
Wow.
we're grossly underrepresented. So I believe there needs to be more of an initiative for change. However, we are seeing a bit more than we have in prior years. So I'm proud of that, but it's a long way to go. And it doesn't address the health equity that's been lacking really in the same opportunities for those interested.
And that's one of the things that I guess I'm kind of on the bigger picture afraid of and everything. I just wanted to know your thoughts because while we saw a lot of people really give a lot of great deal of respect to our teachers, our doctors, our pharmacists, and of course we saw a lot of you painted as what you are, which is heroes and everything. But sometimes when these things happen, like a pandemic or a world disaster, those that are at the forefront are given that hero status that they deserve. But then after the incident goes down, that status doesn't follow them as the society goes on. I'm thinking about the way that we used to treat firemen with a whole great deal of respect after 9/11, and we saw a lot of those firemen going to those burning buildings and things of that nature to rescue who they could rescue when that terrorist attack happened. And even Katrina, when that happened, we saw a lot of rescue workers that were definitely treated as heroes and all of that. But then, a year or two later, people were back to their norm and all of that. So is that a concern that you have, that while y'all as frontline workers are treated as heroes now, that hero status could die down and that it could become just regular, no, back to the norm to some degree, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I hear you. Honestly, Mark, when you're in this space, you stop caring about the hero title because it's already at a point where it's above you. It's always been about servant leadership and helping your community.
Yeah.
It may help to get the recognition. And so if we're talking about maybe if we're going to talk specifically about the field of pharmacy and how we're being used left and right to not only fight the pandemic, but we're doing this with less hours, less help, less pay. We're going to be taken advantage of because capitalism seems to reign high in this country, and that's just the way America is. But when it comes to those who are truly on the front lines, coming from a place of love in your heart, we're burned out. I can't lie to you. This is hard work. This is not easy work. And the point is, though, it's for our people. We don't want our people dying. And so we don't come in for a hero title. And this is why I mentioned how important you got to be a matter of a service needs to be a part of your soul to be in healthcare, frankly. So yes, we're on the front lines. Yes, we may get the accolades and recognition now. Down the road, I just want to make sure y'all are here to see me down the road. The whole point is just making sure you have the tools to navigate an already broken system. And so we have layers of systemic, institutional, medical racism rampant. And so the hero or not, we have to change the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is lack of access for people who have the needs or who need these means to better themselves. And so, just speaking frankly, I can't speak for everyone else, but I'm not in this for the hero game. I never was. I'm in this for people who look like me and who need that voice, and that's what it's always been about.
Oh yeah. And speaking of that, being there for the people and their needs, and I definitely could tell that. I could tell that from your emails. Definitely having those conversations with folks with AADE that know you and everything. So I definitely knew that you were definitely in it for the right reasons and all of that. But just in terms of our needs in our community, there is, kind of that elephant in the room kind of situation, which is that there's a major lobby that's out there, and sometimes that major lobby doesn't always work for us, and that's that major lobby in this case of big pharma and all
Mm,
of that. So how are some of the
mm.
ways that we can work with big pharma and also work to kind of like level the playing field? Because whether it's COVID or whether it's just general health needs, our community is not always getting the kind of service that we need. So I'd love to hear your thoughts as to what we can do about that.
That's a great question. I completely agree. Big pharma, you know, is a little bit part to blame, apart from, let's be honest, our general government for not enforcing more transparency,
Right.
not to address the elephant in the room. For instance, apologizing for some of the transgressions and how they've treated marginalized communities, Native Americans, Blacks, Latina, etc. And even in the rollout of the vaccines, like there's been no effort for trying to educate and reach those communities who don't have access. And so you're just letting misinformation run rampant. And I'm not saying it's all on big pharma, it's not all their fault, but traditionally there is a disservice to when African Americans or any minority has experiences with some of these companies, and you become just another test tube subject. And so the blame needs to be equally shared. It shouldn't just all be big pharma. But I will say that there are ways that they are breaking those barriers. For instance, partnering and working with community leaders,
Right.
working with local church faith-based groups, finding and actually willingly building a dialogue. So you're not just coming in whenever there's a need and coming out when, all right, we got what we needed, we're done. And unfortunately, that happens a lot when we deal with big name healthcare systems locally and abroad. And so when you have ongoing relationships that listen and actually act upon a team-based community lens, you can truly implement change. And for instance, a good niche of that would be minority recruitment for clinical trials. You already
Mhm.
know that we want to be in a clinical trial. So the skepticism is real. We got our life experiences, we have Tuskegee to blame, we have several other reasons to not be involved. However, if you actually put in some money, some funding, some time to actually show how this can help with the right people speaking about something, you can make some change. And that's what
Right.
we've seen, honestly, with the African American COVID Task Force. We're able to bridge some of those gaps and liaison between some of those bigger names so people can get the full picture and get the transparency, not just be used for the time and then left dry later.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Could you talk about the task force, how it came about, and what its purpose is, and who's all involved in it? And along those same lines, I'd love for you to also talk about some of the ways, not just with COVID, but just in general, that y'all have broken down some of those historical stereotypes as well. Because I know that some of the people that were anti-vaxxers in our community, for lack of a better term, were that way was because they were reflecting back on, say, Tuskegee and some of the earlier times when we
Mhm,
were misused and mistreated and all of
mhm.
that. So I was just wondering if you could address some of those that might have those same fears. 'Cause I even know a young lady, I believe she's in DC, that has some of those fears based on that, knowing that history and being originally from Louisiana.
Right, right. No, great point. So yeah, just to start with your first part, the African American COVID Task Force was founded almost over a year ago, I believe last April, May, with two internal doctors, Dr. Roosevelt Campbell and Dr. Andrew Flynn, who were a part of Duke's health system. They saw the immediate need of educating our Black communities, especially during the height of COVID last year. So this being said, those two had a mission and a purpose, and they ended up working with other strategic partners in the community. This includes people who also work with different departments at Duke, like Duke's Clinical Translational Institute, and other like Siri. And so we have amazing members. Our exec board comprises of Leatrice Martin, of course, Roosevelt Campbell, Andrew Flynn, Dr. Birch, Dr. Angela Birch.
Right.
We also have Miss Kimberly Monroe, who's also a strategic partner as well and part of our exec board, myself included, Delon Canterbury. We also had Miss Maria Small, Dr. Maria Small, involved as well. And so it was literally 6 of us who saw this need and just kept having weekly meetings, which we have every Tuesday at 12. And all we did initially was get people together to figure out how can we share resources, how can we get the word out, and most importantly at the time, how can we get our people tested? When those vaccine tests first came out, they were not in the Black communities or Latin communities. They were only in the higher majority populations that had higher income. And that was a problem. And that was seen because we're looking at admission rates in hospitals where Latinas last summer were nearly 60% of all COVID cases in Durham County. And so Latin 19 ended up creating a task force. Similarly, we did the very same thing. But this is not just a matter of just COVID. We want to make sure we use all of our strategic partners, and I've named a couple earlier, but there are tons that we work with in addressing the social barriers associated, rental assistance, transportation, but we also provide a service of conducting not just weekly meetings to just have an open forum, but we put on seminars, we put on panels, we put on, Q&A forums across the community, educating people, making sure they know where to get their facts from, making sure they know not to fall prey to misinformation like we do on social media. And so seeing the immediate needs and the staggering and still staggering numbers, I think about 50% of new COVID cases in Durham are unfortunately Black. And this is still a problem. And so we are not there in terms of getting everyone on board and fully vaccinated. And the numbers don't lie. We're the ones who are still dying and being hospitalized and having worse outcomes because of this. And so when people are still unsure or on the fence, you got to make sure you're cognizant of what you're taking in. Like, what information are you deciding that on? Is it because something your family member said, or was it something you learned in church, or was it something you got from a professional who is in the healthcare field? And you just want to be careful of what perceptions of other people are put onto you. So there is a little bit of self-responsibility, but there's also the need to seek out good information, not just biased information, and we don't have all the answers, don't get me wrong, but we came from a place of pure love for our people and just passion for making sure that we get those numbers down. And that's why I'm proud to be a part of the executive board of the African American COVID Task Force and working with such amazing, amazing people who've kept this going to this day.
Yeah, it sounds like y'all are just doing some truly amazing work. There's no doubt about that. And you kind of alluded to it with people listening to church folks and everything. But if there are folks out there that are still, hung up on the Tuskegee experiment or whatever,
Sure.
what kind of direct answers do you give them if they're hung up on some of the government's past infamy? Because the government, definitely the U.S. government, has had some past infamy in our community, even though it's not necessarily doing that this time around. But how do you get people out of that mindset?
First of all, we got to talk about, like you mentioned earlier, the elephant in the room. And that is, yes, this was egregious. This was horrible. This was wrong. Okay. Tuskegee was wrong. And that's something that needs to be said, no matter who you are. But the first thing I usually do is meet people where they are. And that's understand their fear and concern, because everyone should have a healthy bit of fear and concern of what they're getting injected with. And so you got to start with where people are at, right? So if they're fearful about something, I ask, what are you fearful of? And then we are able to really whittle down into the process. Okay, do you think it was made too quickly? Because we've actually just done a couple steps in 1 year versus 10 years. And we've had this technology for a decade. So, it's being able to piece through simply and not to be, judgmental or patriarchal or just telling you what to do. It's not about that. It's just really about objective information, right? So I start with their fears. What's your fears? Is it we don't know long-term effects? Okay, then all right. Did you know that most of the effects seen from a vaccine would be present within 2 months? And we've had data from over a couple million people across the world who are also Black. Do they know that part? Because you have to know all the parts, right? Because you
Right.
can't make it off of, well, I heard so and so had a blood clot. That's okay. That's 15 out of a couple million. So we're talking about 0.450 is 1.8%. And so you got to make sure that there's the full truth and not the partial truth. And that I feel is what fuels misinformation. Again, I come from a place of love and objectivity. I get to your fears, all right? And then I just put things clear as mud, or okay, clear as day, whatever.
Right.
But really, I just say, look, we're dying, okay? We are the few people who have access to 3 vaccines, right, in our country. And there are countries where our people who don't even have one.
Right.
And you're seeing examples today, like India, where people are dying and where vaccinated countries are not. It's no longer about racism at this point. Don't get me wrong, there's a little piece of it, but it's no longer about Tuskegee experiment. It's now everyone is dying regardless of race. COVID don't care what you look like. It just cares if you have a body and can I kill you. That's really it. And so I try to break it down in the sense of, do you understand that? Not just do you understand, but who are you doing this for? You know what I'm saying? Who do you want to see? Who do you want to make sure you're not potentially infecting if you came across them? So I try to make it very personal because a lot of this was my family. You know what got me into this, like really fired up, was one of my second moms. She said, I'm not getting it because I don't trust it. I'm like, oh, okay. If she's not getting it, all right, I gotta start telling people because now I'm worried. Now I'm like, okay, what can I do to help you understand? It took her 2-3 months. She eventually got it, but I'm concerned if you may have diabetes or other chronic conditions that may make your outcome much worse. And so it's all about coming from a place of love, having empathy and understanding people's fears, and then being able to reiterate those fear points and break down really what their concerns are. And so even with Tuskegee, that's the whole thing we could break down. They say, all right, they did not give anyone syphilis.
Right.
They just let them have syphilis worsen. That's one. They gave them placebo. They gave them nothing. Okay, still wrong, but that's different from giving someone a vaccine that might save your life or might have a chip in it, or you might grow a third head, little stuff like that. So there are nuances to that. However, it comes from approaching the misinformation, being understanding those fears.
Yeah, so we definitely got to tackle those issues like you were saying and everything. I think that he may have gotten slightly frozen on me again, but definitely was bringing up some very powerful points, and definitely I can understand where we're going in that regard. So hopefully we'll have Delon Canterbury come back and share a little bit more and everything, because definitely those were some great and powerful points that he was bringing into the forefront of what's going on, and I can definitely understand what he's saying and all of that. So hopefully the rest of you can catch this very powerful message that he's given us, and the one that we all need to be aware of and all of that. So like I said, you were freezing there for a minute, but we caught the gist of it and all. One of the things that I've noticed that some folks have talked about is the concern about us not just that we need to pay attention to COVID. There's no doubt about that. That's a major pandemic that we're in the middle of, but that we also want to be concerned about other issues as well, because there's definitely we had Chadwick Bosewick and everything that was involved with the whole prostate colon cancer, I believe it was, and definitely folks are talking about colon and prostate and a number of other issues that are still striking our community, even diabetes and high blood pressure. So what is your thoughts about folks that also want to make sure that we are tackling the pandemic, but also not forgetting other important issues in our community? For example, like even with the women, breast cancer and things of that nature.
Oh man, amazing question, man. We cannot neglect our overall well-being because of the pandemic. At first, we were all scared of what was going to happen, but now we have telehealth. We have ways that you can reach out to people virtually on your phone to get the help you need. But to make your point known, it's true. Everything has increased and worsened. We've got cancer on the rise within our Black communities. We have mental health, which has deteriorated as well. We also have rise of lack of controlled management of chronic diseases, like you mentioned, diabetes and heart attack. And when you're at home sitting all day, if you are, you're not exactly getting the most exercise that you should. And I'm guilty of that myself. And so I've learned that we've had to really embrace new ways of seeing a provider. And so telehealth is an amazing way to get that done. Most insurance companies pay for it. Medicare and Medicaid pays for it. And in fact, you can still Google or find if you need some help with your mental health. Mental health providers are on the rise as well as a demand for the need for people who are going through it. So I encourage you, if you can, to please reach out to me if you need to, but reach out to a trusted health professional to make sure you're getting those checkups, getting those screens. I know at first that we were trying to do away with that, but things are a little different now. We have a vaccine. Doctors' offices are seeing patients. So now we can try to get back to some normalcy in terms of not to downplay your mental state, man. It's hard. Like the stuff in the news is difficult to digest. So be aware of that. If your mood swings, if you're finding just changes or just really a lack of control of some of your health conditions, it's definitely time to reach out to someone virtually. See if your doctor provides it. See if they can do a FaceTime call. There are plenty of people who do Zoom and face call meetings to get your health needs. They also have text. You can text people. And they even have some local community groups that offer free services to help you through these times, and especially a number of groups like Durham Tri also provide those services with Wanda Boone's leadership, as well as community health workers who are out there day and night trying to community. If you don't even want to go through the telehealth route, that you can consider for help with these needs.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's important that we got to have those folks doing that on everything in that regard. Sometimes I do think that we as a people, meaning Latin folks, African Americans, Native Americans, all the minority community, I would even argue the Indian community as well, don't always trust our doctors, our pharmacists, and even our mental health providers as well. So what are some of the ways that as a pharmacist you try to get people past their fears? Because I know a lot of times we'll try to stay away from a doctor as long as we can. We might go see the pharmacist, but we try to stay away from the doctor. Hoping that the candidate heard that. I don't know if you heard that and everything, but I was asking about the whole concept of getting the need to have our folks trusted.
Sorry about that, Mark.
Things along those lines.
Concept of what now?
the concept of needing to trust the medical professions and all of that, because sometimes I feel that we don't do enough of a good job of trusting folks within the minority community.
Oh, yes, yes. And I think that's where it starts with really some of those community-facing groups. You know, I mentioned Durham Tribe. There's Peach of Durham. Community Health Coalition is another known one. Um, I mean, these are the groups that you want to start reaching out to if you trust them. And if not them, check out your church faith-based leaders. You know, usually there's some type of resources person who's in those groups, and they can at least point you to someone who you can trust with some of those issues. It's fair to have that mistrust with some of those doctors. If you don't feel comfortable, that's okay. However, don't just turn a blind eye and think it's going to go away in time. It doesn't usually work that way. And especially myself, I've had to learn how to manage my struggles with anxiety and depression during these times, and try to find healthy outlets, you know, whether it's working out or whether it's, you know, using community services, community-based groups to help me find someone I could trust to get that help. So yeah, and in fact, even a good friend of mine, Dr. Darius Russell, he actually has that African American pharmacy you mentioned off of Angier. He's been of great help just in helping me with medication prices. And so you'd be surprised how those mom and pop independent pharmacies can go that extra mile for their patients. And that's not always found at your usual chains.
No, that's very much true and everything. I've got a second part of the show that I'll be bringing on. There was a pre-recorded interview with a gentleman out of Shanghai and everything. But one of the things I try to get all my guests to do, and I'd love for you to do it as well, is it's a global platform, and you've definitely brought a lot of positivity to this first hour and everything. But I always try to get all my guests to give their message of positivity, their message of encouragement to our global audience. So any words of encouragement or positivity that you like to share before we go into the second half of the show, which is my interview with Colin, who is a business executive who moved from the United States over there to Shanghai. So we're going to share a little bit of his story, because I did a pre-interview with him, so folks will see the lighting shift as well, because it was done almost at the midnight hour about a week ago. But you're going to bring that up. So any words of positivity or messages of encouragement that you like to share with our global audience? And also any social media that you want to share
Beautiful.
as well, Dr. Canterbury.
Yeah. Well, again, Mark, thank you again for having me. You can check out my work at geriatrics.org, GERIATRX as in X-ray.org. We're also on all types of social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. And also check out the work that the African American COVID Task Force is doing. We have our own Facebook page, and you can follow us there for updates for community events. Really, my advice is that there is hope. I've many times doubted whether I'm on the right path. And I say, keeping a little light of hope, no matter how bleak things are, as cheesy as it may sound, it can change your whole mindset. And when you have that mindset shift, it becomes contagious. And so focus on the little things that make you happy once a day. At least, you know, give yourself 30 minutes if you can, and just find a little bit of joy in life. You know, we're all going through some tough times. COVID has been horrible. The world is looking ugly with wars and conflict, but I think everything starts with a little bit of love. And when you start realizing that it's bigger than you or bigger than me, you know, we can literally change people's day. And I think that should be the ultimate goal.
No, no doubt about that. I definitely appreciate you being on. And since you said there's hope, is there hope of me making it to 200, or is that still next to an impossible goal? Because I like to tease my doctors that I'm going for it, even though I'm not doing anything physically to do it. Because like you, I've not been out to get enough exercise. So I know that I need to go do some exercise and better diet if I'm trying to make this goal a reality. But I've just figured I'd throw it out there, since that's the title of your organization and everything. Can I make it to 200 if I'm at 58? And 59 in July. Dr. Canterbury is like he's gonna not
Mark, it's
he's
been
gonna
a
pass.
pleasure, man. Really wish you would.
What were you saying?
I said it's really been a pleasure just being here, man. And I just wanted to thank you again for your positivity and sharing that little bit of light, man. Keep doing what you're doing.
Oh, no problem. I love to share light, love to share positive messages, love to have the encouragement and to give encouragement to folks. And y'all are doing some amazing work. And I hope to be able to get you to come back again and share anytime that y'all are doing this work on a regular basis. So, you're always welcome to come back anytime that you feel like it and to share anything that the task force is doing and anything that you're doing individually. So, anytime you want to share what's going on, you're always welcome to come back here on this show as well as my other show and share your messages of positivity. But I greatly appreciate you joining me this afternoon. And like I said, I'm ready to go into that part of the interview with Colin and everything that I pre-recorded and all. But I definitely want to thank you for joining us here and for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge and definitely encouraging more and more people to get that vaccination because we definitely need to get to that full herd immunity. Like I said, I heard we were at a little bit above 51%, but we still got a ways to go to we're at the maximum amount that we need and all of that. So I appreciate your encouraging folks to go out there and get those vaccinations. So on that
I
note, I'm
appreciate you,
going
Mark,
to
anytime. And I'll be back when you need me.
sounds good. Definitely looking forward to it. So, like I said, I'll be bringing him off and everything, and then I'm going to bring up this great show that we did earlier, which was the interview with the gentleman that was out of, like I said, out of the other area of the country. He's over there in Shanghai, and we talked a lot about business and things of that nature. So, looking forward to this great conversation that was held earlier and everything. So, I hope that y'all will enjoy it as well. So, I'm going to bring that up right now, and there we go. Oops. Hold on. Doing a pre-recorded portion of the interview today. Some of y'all doing a pre-recorded portion of the interview today. Some of y'all might be seeing the nightfall in the background and being like, "Hey, it's not afternoon; it's nighttime over there where Mark is." So what's going on with that? But we've done a couple of these pre-recorded interviews because sometimes people are around different parts of the world and all of that. And of course, we do like to accommodate people and make sure that the schedules are done right because there's so many interesting folks throughout this globe, and we love sharing their stories and what they're all about. So definitely, I've got a gentleman that's spending some time in Asia, even though he's a American by birth and everything. But definitely looking forward to hearing about this journey that he's been going on, including about diversity. Because one of the things I'm going to mention to Colin when he comes on, and I'm here to bring Colin on right now, is that it's actually come up in conversations that I've had with folks. Because as I was saying, I was actually just talking to some people earlier on one of my other podcasts, and we were having a whole conversation. It was actually my audio podcast about leadership and the qualities of what makes a good leader. And almost, I want to say that all three of them, because two of them were veterans, and one of them has worked in the FBI and in a prosecution office and everything. But almost all of them use the topics of having to understand other cultures as a good tool of a good leader. So it's something that seems to be a quality that most leaders need is to have that ability to understand people from different cultures, from different ethnicities, from different genders, and everything else. I don't know that as a society we do a good job of teaching that in terms of a leadership trait. But I was very much surprised that I knew I was going to have you on later that many of them brought up that need for us to actually, even if we don't want to agree with the person, if say they're a different faith at least having an understanding of them and where they are coming from. So it sounds like that's where a lot of your work is at, and where a lot of the things that you're about is involved in. So definitely, if you could share your thoughts on that and just your reflections on the role of diversity within leadership. Like I said, I was surprised. And I want to say it actually happened on two shows, because another show was a gentleman who was talking about getting out of poverty. And even in his conversation, he talked about diversity and the need to have a better leadership skills as a tool for getting out of poverty. And he had been in poverty when he was a kid and is committed to getting others out of poverty as well.
Yeah, so Mark, first of all, thanks for having me on your show. As you know, I am here in Shanghai, China. I've been in China for the last 13 years. And let me back up. My name is Colin Thompson. I am a Jamaican-born Canadian, born in Canada to Jamaican family. We immigrated from Jamaica to Canada. Well, they immigrated from Jamaica to Canada, and then I came out, and we immigrated together along with my 5 siblings, from Canada to the U.S. So I spent the vast majority of my life in the U.S. and I've been coming over here to China for the past 13 years. And you talk about leadership and diversity, and those two things typically weren't together. But I think, as you mentioned, any great leader has to be able to relate and have empathy for their team. So you see a lot of leaders really want to do a better job of understanding. We call understanding where somebody's coming from, their point of view. I think that it's not so much nowadays of diversity, because a lot of environments have a diverse set or a diverse team. That could be different genders. It could be based on religious views. It could be based on race. There are a lot of different categories to make a team diverse. What I think strong leaders really are doing now, and I'm glad they are, they're focusing on inclusion. It's not as important to have a team that has a diverse background, but how do you make sure all these different cultures and views are brought forth? How do you make sure that people are comfortable enough to speak out, to share their ideas, to really be themselves? And I think inclusion, it really gets overlooked a lot. You look at organizations that say, we're really trying to make sure we have a very diverse workforce, or we want to reflect our customer base. We want you to look at us. We want you to see men, women, minorities. We want you to see and ages, young folks, older folks. We want you to see a very diverse workforce. That is easier to do now. Well, there's still challenges, especially when it comes to hiring. But a lot of companies will just say, we want to be more diverse, so they can check a box, so they can be compliant. What happens, though, is when you don't focus also on the inclusion side of it, you have people who are in the organization and have no opportunity for promotion, have no opportunity to learn more, have no opportunity to really build on their skill sets. So having a diverse environment is the first step, but you have to have an environment where people can be themselves and people can actually get opportunities to become more valuable in the workforce, which is why we work, right? We want to become more valuable year on year on year. So I think, the leaders, as you said, I think a lot of folks who went to war, now I've never been to war. Thank gosh, I've never been to war. But I think when you go to war, your mindset changes, because you're fighting with people from all different backgrounds. You're in a strange country and you're seeing it's not the people we're fighting. It's not that we're fighting this army here, but it's not the people. And you have more empathy for your fellow soldiers and the local people whose country you're in. So I think that's part of why when those folks come back home, they become more open and more inclusive to being, what I would say, an ally to those people.
That makes a lot of sense. Do you think, and you mentioned the fact that you worked for a number of years in Shanghai and everything, do you think that other societies, be that Eastern societies or Middle Eastern or maybe South African societies, do a better job of inclusion than we do here in the States? And if they do a better job, why do you think they do a better
job? I can speak for China.
Right.
And in China, there's two different dynamics. There's a Chinese company or state-owned company, and there's a foreign company. So in a Chinese company, you have probably 99% of employees are Chinese. Mm-hmm. So now in that dynamic, one thing you have to understand is there is no race issue. So now it's really more on gender, or on gender, gender or on age. So age and gender are the big, I would say, bias categories here in China. Again,
Right.
everybody, it's not necessarily based on color. So they do a good job giving, I would say, women opportunity for promotion.
Mhm.
There's still some traditional environments here where men are going to get more opportunity. And I'll tell you, one of the things I learned, I came to China with IBM years ago, and
Right.
we were recruiting some new people, and HR would tell me, Colin, when you're recruiting or interviewing a girl, a woman, ask her if she's going to get married, if she's going to have a baby. I can't ask that. That's illegal, right? You can't ask that in the U.S., right? And
Right.
in China, you can. And if the person says yes, they're going to have a baby soon, or they just got married, that was actually a negative point for them. So that may put them out of the running for the job. So I think there's still some ways to go here for equality in hiring. And now going to the foreign company, and a foreign company can have employees from any country. I think that I think that inclusion, I think it's a little better than in the US. And reason being, if you're here with a foreign company, it means that you're on assignment for a few years, which means that you are a top talent. And top talents tend to act like top talent, meaning they're going to share their views, they're going to not necessarily be so shy. So I think they do a good job there. But I've done coaching for, let's say, some German companies, and in German companies, it's really more about ability, not necessarily about male, female, or age. It's really about how you work, how you produce. So I think that I've seen it here. I would say they do it a little. I don't want to say better here, but you don't see as much issues with diversity and inclusion here. And again, I think it's because one, people here are top talent, and they're more likely to speak out. The better at building teams, and two, there's the absence of the good old fashioned racism here.
Right.
And I think in other Western environments, that is always the elephant in the room. That's always that. I think that there are a lot of different categories when it comes to diversity, when it comes to biases. But I think that race is one that's rooted in so much history. It's hard to really get past that one. Ageism, um, what gender you relate to, as far as how you categorize yourself, male, female, they, whatnot. That's a little more easy to deal with. But racism, discrimination based on color of your skin, that one's a little more deep rooted and harder to discuss and harder to work through. And that takes place in the U.S. Well, not in the U.S. It takes place in the West.
Right. No, I definitely agree with you on that. One of the things I definitely want to get to the conversation about the workplace and racism, but another part of the conversation that I think sometimes gets left out, and you alluded to it to some degree, is that whole concept of ageism. Because I do have some friends of mine that are in the latter parts of their work job and everything. They might be in the professor jobs and things along higher education, and they're definitely seeing that they are being eased out. And definitely folks are trying to encourage them to retire, even though as we're getting older, folks can work well into their 80s and 90s, in my mind, if they're able to be competent in the work. And many of them are still very much sound of mind and sound of spirit and all of that. But whether it's here or whether it's there in Asia, do you think that ageism is another part of the discussion that needs to be had that we're not having enough of?
Absolutely. Well, I think every category, every sort of category where there's some bias and discrimination that needs to be discussed. And I see ageism differently here because I think the young workforce has a hard time getting accepted in organizations here in China because they just graduate. And here, it's a little, as a adolescent and a teenager in China, they do one thing, that's school. School education on the weekends, it's not go to the park and have fun. On weekends, it's go to some sort of extracurricular activity such as piano lessons, dancing lessons, but it's very much focused on learning, learning, learning. How can you pass this one test? You take one test, which gets you into university. How can you do best on that test? In university, you do one thing, go to school. So when you graduate, you take any job you can get, not necessarily a job in your major. So when you start with a company, the companies view you as young and inexperienced in work and in life. So it's very hard for them to get accepted by the older generation. I think one of the things that has sort of changed that dynamic is the use of social media and how the younger workforce has grasped onto that, which is something that even people my age, I'm in my late 40s, I'm not so open to social media. And not
Mm.
social media as far as me sending a tweet, but me marketing my business, me finding consumers, and being able to build my brand online. So there are some areas with the younger generation are really adding value to companies, but there's still some resistance. Going to the other dynamic, looking at the older workforce, I do a lot of career coaching, and one of the challenges I have is convincing people who are above the age of 45 that their careers. A lot of times they feel that it's hard for them to get a job because they're too old. And I tell
Mm.
them, you're not too old. You have a lot of experience. You got to sort of shift that dynamic. And how do you make yourself come off as being very, very valuable to the workforce? So, people are being pushed out. And I always tell people who feel they're being pushed out of the organization, do two things.
Yep. What are those two things?
Yeah. I'm just trying to say it the right way. Um, Resist without causing problems, right? Resist, and start looking at your next thing
Mm.
because you want to. I'll say this: you want to stay in your environment if it's good for as long as you can, as long as you can. If it's a good environment, but you also want to see the writing on the wall. If
Right.
they're pushing you out, don't. I mean, you want to resist, but don't wait to be pushed out. It's
Mm.
always easier to get a new job when you have a job. I say that when you have a job.
Yeah.
So if they're pushing you out, get coached up and find out how do you write that resume? How do you have your online resume? How do you let's be honest, how do you use your network to find the next job? Because the older you are, your network should be strong. And using your network is the best way to find new opportunities.
I was talking earlier today with one of the guests, and we were actually talking about businesses and business planning. And I know that I'm oftentimes shocked that people don't necessarily, if they're trying to start a business, have a business plan or a marketing plan. The other thing that sometimes shocks me is folks that go looking for jobs that don't necessarily have a resume, or they think that the LinkedIn profile is going to be resume enough. So does that happen within your career counseling? And are you as shocked as I am when somebody is asking you for a resume or asking you for something that would be the equivalent of a resume, and they don't have it in their portfolio or in their computer banks or whatever? So I'm
Right.
sometimes surprised that people don't even have the basic necessities, but I was wondering your thoughts.
Yeah. I don't get shocked or surprised. I, Actually, I get more thankful that I'm able to help them level up. Because the reason they're coming to me for coaching is because they need assistance in how to improve their career, get a job. And Mark, let's be honest, most folks, let's say about age of 40, have probably interviewed maybe 4 different times in their lives. Not say interview,
Yeah.
not 4 interviews, but 4 times after college. After college, maybe when you're in your late 20s, maybe mid 30s. So a lot of folks don't have that experience interviewing, which also means that in 20, 25 years, they probably updated the resume 3 times.
Right.
So they just really have not had that experience. And I think a lot of people now look at LinkedIn because the moment, for example, you reach out to me, Mark, I go to LinkedIn and try to find you. And
Right.
LinkedIn has a lot of information, and headhunters go to LinkedIn now also. So I do understand why they think LinkedIn is is an avenue, and LinkedIn is an avenue, but you still have to have that updated resume. And look, if you're 45 years old and you have a 3-page resume, no. You have to cut that down. You have to really make sure you have a resume that can compete with your neighbor. I always tell my clients, imagine the neighbor on your left, neighbor on your right. You're all going for the same exact job. What makes you stand out and makes you more valuable to that company than they are? And every little thing counts. If I have a 3-page resume in front of me and a 2-page resume, I might not get to page 3. I might not get there. If I'm an HR person, I have a stack of resumes in front of me. So you have to understand how to tell your story precisely. And you have to now have a new thing, an online presence.
Right.
If I can't find you online anywhere, I wonder why not. I wonder why not. And if I could find somebody else who's computing for a job online and learn more about them, see an article they've written or see some comments, I know more about them.
Mm. You actually brought up something about that page resume or the 3-page resume versus the 2-page resume. I had actually heard some people argue that if you can, and I know that it's not always possible depending on your skills and how many jobs you've had, that you should try to get that down to 1 page. And that seems to me that that's next to impossible, but maybe it is possible. So are you thinking that 2 pages is the resume size that most people should have, or is it possible to even have a 1-page resume?
Well, I've had some clients who had 4-page resumes, and Mark, I have to tell you, it was very challenging for them to get down to 2. So I knew there was no way they'd get down to 1. And I was working with a colleague of mine who's a movie producer, and he had a term called "killing your babies." Do you know that term?
I think I've heard the term, but explain it to our listeners and
Yeah.
everything, because I'm not sure that I know the full meaning.
Okay. So he was helping me with my story, my Colin Thompson story, and I said, "Okay, here's my story." I know it's like 2 pages long, and it had all these things I thought so important. He goes, you gotta cut this down. And I said, but this is so important to me. He said, Colin, you gotta kill your babies, right? What you think is so important here, just take it out, it'll be okay. So I tell my clients now, you gotta kill some of your babies. Your paragraph or 4 bullets on this job experience, you gotta take it out. I know you think it's important. I know you do, but just take it out. You gotta kill it. You gotta, 'cause sometimes what we think is most important isn't most important, right? So I think a 2-page resume is okay, depending upon the the industry also, right? If you're going for an academic role versus engineering role versus a financial role, you're going to have it would be very, very different. But I think anything above 2 pages is just too much. Because you got to imagine the first person to read your resume isn't the manager. It's going to be somebody in HR, and they're looking for buzzwords, keywords, buzzwords, or phrases, and they may not get to that 3rd page.
Colin, you actually brought up another interesting point that one of our founders on this network talks about all the time, because Nick Palveda is oftentimes talking about the fact, and actually Kim Calhoun is another founder, also kind of seconds that emotion that he brings out. But he talks about the fact that we're in the 21st century, but in a lot of ways we teach 18th century values. And he's actually an actuary and involved in law as a financial lawyer and all of that. And she is an engineer. So do you think, because I do remember growing up, and I'm in my late 50s now, growing up, there were courses on, creating a resume. There were those books like What Color is Your Parachute that talked about careers and things of that nature. I don't know, and I've got 2 nephews that'll be 12 and 13 in August, that they're getting that same kind of background that we were getting, in the sense of being prepared by learning how to write a resume, whether it's on a computer screen or the way we used to do it on the old-fashioned typewriter. But do you feel that the education system is living up to its potential in terms of training people and in terms of getting people prepared for the job force?
Well, just sticking with the resume example, or we still do cover letters. People are surprised that we still do cover letters. I think that our version of resumes and colors are going away, because now stronger and people are looking more at what I call their digital credentials online. What training have they taken? So the resume is strong, but people are now going to say, "What are your credentials?" And the what I could say, the online resume is coming, where you no longer have this thing with paper and whatnot. So I do think what we're seeing with LinkedIn and other platforms is going to be the way forward. Again, I want to be able to go to your I want to be able to type your name in or go to your space online on internet and see your information. I don't necessarily need to have a PDF or Word file anymore. So I do think that's coming. As far as whether I think the schools are preparing, I don't think it's the school responsibility to prepare the students for that, because there are a lot of people who haven't had the opportunity to go to school. and they still must be prepared for that. I think it's each individual person's responsibility to go online, to go Google how to prepare for a job, how to prepare for an interview. And a lot of my time, I tell my clients, the internet has all the information that you need, all the information that you need. When I was in college, we had a career counselor, and they would give us advice, give us some feedback on our resumes. But it wasn't until I saw some other resumes and copied that format. So it's still going online, looking at some examples, and building yourself up. So I don't think it's a school responsibility, because a lot of folks don't go to school, haven't had the opportunity to go to school, but they still are applying for these jobs.
Yeah, because one of the other things that I know that one of our other shows, I think it's called, it's got Spy in the title. I'm trying to remember the full title of the show, but he does a lot of things around cybersecurity and things along those lines. So I guess my question in that regards is, do you ever worry that, I agree that we definitely have a lot of our stories and a lot of our existence there online, and that's how employees find us, but they can also find the negative aspects of our lives as well. So how important do you think it is for you to find ways to, one, maybe not get involved in any negativity, but if you do get involved in it, not let it get out into the greater scope of the internet? Because I know that that has definitely hurt some people on job hunts, not just here in the West, but in the East as well as throughout the globe.
Right. You know, we say whatever you put online stays there forever. It stays there forever. And I think, especially the last few years, we've seen that things people have written maybe 10 years ago are being brought back up now, and they're paying the price for it. 20 years ago, 20 years ago was what? People weren't really posting things online so much. But one of the things I do, I have a company. I founded with two other gentlemen outside of my coaching and training company. It's called Exchange. And Exchange is an online education platform. And we offer training, coaching, and assessments there. And the key, I bring this up because as you complete each module, you're awarded what we call a digital credential. And this credential is stored on the blockchain. And as you know about blockchain is a strong record. It can't be changed, and the individual can give access to that file to whom they want. So when we talk about going forward and how do you protect your records, you're going to find more entities using blockchain to secure and give people the security they need. Now, as far as having some information, maybe you had a bad tweet or you posted something wrong on Facebook. Look, be smart. Just don't do it. Don't do it. And it's hard to say that because if I say something today and it's accepted, it could be deemed inappropriate 5 years from now. So we have to be aware of that. And I think that more and more organizations are understanding, well, two things. They're understanding that people have lives, people make mistakes, but they're also seeing the price they pay when they don't address something somebody said years ago. So even though they say, you know what, you saying something inappropriate 5 years ago, we understand that back then it was a big deal, but it is now, and we may have to take action because our clients, our employees, they may feel a certain way about it. So I think the best thing to do is just be mindful of what you're doing and putting online.
That makes a lot of sense. I know a lot of times when people think about inclusion and diversity, they definitely think about, of course, most employment companies and corporations have harassment policies about anti-harassment and definitely don't want sexual harassment or harassment around race issues and things of that nature. But on the flip side of that, we often say that the three things that you should never speak about, except for maybe with your select friends and your select relatives and all of that, is discussions around politics, religion, and there might be a few other things. Some people might even argue sports in there as well. But definitely, we do have people, as the world is a diverse place, that are of different religions, of different political views, of different views on hot button issues, be that abortion, be that the death penalty, or whatever. So as a career coach, what is your advice to people about even broaching those subjects or talking to somebody that may be of a different faith? Like if they're Christian, maybe it's somebody that's a Buddhist or a Muslim or maybe even a non-believer and all of that. So what is your thoughts about should we in our corporations just stay away from those conversations altogether and leave it at what some people would call water cooler talk, which is basically just what other folks that are there in your company are doing and maybe what the latest sports and TV shows are doing, but things that are relatively, and maybe what your sports teams are doing, but things that are relatively mild mannered? Or can you have those conversations around religion or around some of the political hot button topics in the corporate America in your mind when you're dealing with both career coaching and diversity and inclusion?
Right, right. So as you know, it's a very portion of that. It's a very sensitive topic. I think that having conversation about politics 6 years ago versus 2 years ago was very, very different.
Right.
Very, very different. I think that in the work environment, it's appropriate to talk about topics that relate to work.
Right.
For example, if there's a policy being created that impact work, I think that that's okay. But I'll tell you what, Mark, I think that we have this all wrong, and I think leaders. I hope leaders are starting to change, because if we think about the 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 power of diversity and inclusion, it's getting a diverse team together and having people bring forth their backgrounds and helping the company to have a better opportunity to impact the lives of the customers. So you want a diversity of ideas. What we do though is we say, okay, don't talk about certain topics. Well, let's take race for example.
Right.
I know race is a big. We talk about, especially in the U.S. We talk about diversity and inclusion. Race is a big one.
Right.
So right now in the work environment, they say don't talk about these things, but that's precisely where it should be talked about. Because if you think about the individual, I'm a black guy. I'm a black man.
Mhm.
When I was working in the U.S., I lived in a neighborhood that was majority black.
Right.
My friends were majority black.
Right.
I did not interact. I interacted with people outside of my race primarily at work.
Mhm.
In order for my non-black colleagues and I to understand each other lower than a superficial level, we must talk about this. We must talk about what's happening to my culture, history. We must talk about race in order for us to understand, have empathy. But we don't talk about it. I go back home into my cocoon, so to speak. I talk to black folk about it, but I never talk to anybody in another race about it,
Right.
about race. And work is the only environment for a lot of people where they interact with different races. So
Mhm.
so we have to find a way to bring that up. HR needs to find ways to really make a work environment open so we can have these discussions that are helping, not hurting. So cutting out, saying don't talk about this at work, it takes away a perfect opportunity for people to really have open dialogue, understand each other, and help the company to reach the clients better.
Yeah, and I would argue we don't talk enough even about religion. I remember that I work in a couple of jobs, and one of them is a measurement testing, educational testing company. And I know that in that job there was a gentleman. This was probably, it's been several years since we were working together. It was probably about 6 or 7 years ago, and I knew that, and they gave him the accommodation, so they knew that that was part of the ritual. He made it very much clear that he was of the Muslim faith. So within this job, they actually gave him that time during the I think it's the midday to have midday prayer. So like I said,
Right.
they were aware of what he was going on, and they actually made it some with some people All right, that was a little bit about the interviews that we did with the folks that were talking about COVID, as well as the gentleman from overseas, and definitely enjoyed those conversations. And definitely wanted to come back and share a little bit more of news stories that were going on as well. So y'all will be glad to know that after 100 years, soldiers are no longer segregated on Durham's World War I memorial. That's right. For a number of years, they had been segregated, but no longer. For 100 years, the World War One memorial in Durham served as a constant reminder of a different and more unequal era in American history. So that's one of the things that has definitely gone on in history. The stone pillar was both a monument to those who lost their lives and to a time when not even their ultimate sacrifice could make man equal in the eyes of the country they died serving. So that memorial actually went up in 1921, the first piece in what became a statue garden in front of the old county courthouse. It listed Durham County men who died in the war. The names of the white soldiers were etched onto the front of the monument facing Main Street and easily visible to those who walk past. On the back, out of sight, were the names of the black soldiers. In time, the monument has symbolized a quiet fight for equality. And now, after a year of definitely a lot of conversations around race, and in a time which Confederate monuments throughout the South have been torn down and or removed, Durham's World War I memorial is telling a more complete story. In March, the city unveiled a plaque in front of the memorial, complete with historical context and a full list of the men who died in that war. So definitely glad to see this kind of activity that is going on in terms of like honoring our veterans and making sure that all of the names are recognized and all of that. So definitely that is some great news and very powerful news into the sense of positivity in our society and all of that. And definitely, a lot of people are still thinking about the whole conversation around tenure and the lady that was connected to the 1619 project, Nicole Hannah Jones. And there's even some talk that there may be some legal action as she gets ready to teach over there at UNC. And of course, on a lighter note, on the sports side, the Hurricanes lost their first game, but hopefully they can bounce back and even the series, which will also be played here in the Raleigh Durham area of North Carolina. And then, of course, they've got to go down to Tampa Bay regardless, and definitely see what goes on with the rest of the series. But definitely, they've had to bounce back into the past, and it looks like they're going to have to bounce back once again as well. And I know a lot of people are wondering about the whole thing with Duke Energy and the electric bills, and it does look like higher rates for Duke Energy customers will go into effect starting on tomorrow. In a news release, Duke Energy said rates will increase an average of 4.7% across all of its customer groups. For a typical residential customer, that will bring the average monthly power bill up to just under $120, an increase of about $6, the utility said. The increase for individual customer groups will vary depending on the rate they pay. The average rate increase will be 5.7% for residential customers, 4.7% for commercial customers, and 3.6% for industrial customers. The new rates were approved earlier this year by the North Carolina Utilities Commission. Duke Energy has initially requested a significantly larger rate increase to help pay for cleaning up coal ash at its plant. The Charlotte-based utility agreed to a settlement earlier this year that will save North Carolina customers more than $1.1 billion in cost. So it does look like there is some cost saving going on, but also a lot of people are definitely checking out the whole thing with cost, and definitely, whether it's a rent cost or whether it's power bills or a number of other things, folks are definitely paying attention to that and all of the things that are going in. So definitely, folks are also looking at making comebacks in different businesses. I see that there was an article about downtown Raleigh trying to come back after suffering from a year of not having the kind of events that they're used to. And definitely some of our area restaurants are welcoming indoor diners once again. So again, a lot of these kind of stories and all of that. And a sad story that I actually had seen on the news yesterday was a popular North Carolina barbecue spot was destroyed in fire, but they are hoping to make a comeback and all of that. Never had the privilege of eating at this particular one, but the looks like it was very popular. The Pick and Pig, which is located in Carthage, and was definitely apparently a very popular spot for folks to go to. The restaurant's owner, Ashley Separate, and his mother, Janie, said that posted that their hearts were broken, but they definitely said that they are hoping to make a comeback in the very near future. So they've got some deep roots in that community, and like I said, they are hoping to make a comeback in the not too distant future. So that's just some of the things that are happening in and around North Carolina news and all of that. So I'm going to wrap up the show with a little bit of spots about some of our other existing shows that are here as well. And then, of course, I'll come back with that whole thing that we do with the robot and all of that, which both introduces and outros the show. But one of the shows that I'm a big fan of is my friend Brother Mike's show, Mind Closet.